Dír majorta hirna dan all nefa corfuin on sin stúrin on níver agus neachta grasta vrunna orin on ida hótrin creacha. Onus gur wútsa as over an ilivriher agus an illig fasta agus gur tríta creach nofarid three creach jirna. Direct we beseech their Lord directions by thy holy inspirations and carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee, by thee be happily ended, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Questions to the Minister for Education and Skills, and there's a grouping here, 1 and 4 together. So Deputy McConalogue to introduce the question. 30 seconds.
Minister, this is to ask you the way you propose to address the serious concerns regarding school-based assessment at junior cycle. Thank you.
Come on, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy. As you said, last Call, I'm taking questions 1 and 4 together. The Junior Cycle Student Award, known as the JCSA, will no longer be a terminal exam with high stakes. Treating it as such has been shown to have an unintended negative backwash effect on teaching and on learning in the classroom, and can in some cases lead to an unnecessary focus on rote learning. Our 15-year-olds do not need a state-certified exam. Just as in 1967, it was decided that 12-year-olds did not need a state-certified exam at the end of primary school. Assessment should assist students in their learning and not be regarded as the end point. Assessment is not about proving, but about improving learning outcomes. Unless assessment changes, then I'm reliably informed by educational specialists that nothing else will. Any reform must address this and other factors, so we do not have students experiencing a junior cycle where there is more focus on rote learning and memorization rather than on teaching students how to critically think for themselves, problem solve, communicate and work with others, all the skills that are necessary for life and indeed further in higher education. The new junior cycle will develop better learners. Students will be more skilled in areas such as communication, creativity, managing information, self-management and working with others. As the deputies will recall, these reforms received all party support in both houses in the Oireachtas when we debated them in late 2012. I set up a national working group for junior cycle last January as a forum to proactively address identified challenges and opportunities as they arise over the phased implementation time schedule for the junior cycle from now until September 2019, when all subjects will have been phased in. The officials through this national working group are currently engaged in intensive discussions with the educational stakeholders. A subgroup is considering in detail the issue of quality assurance and support for teacher assessment. As part of its remit, it is addressing external supports for moderation to reassure and support teacher assessment and to help ensure standards. Some education partners have already made detailed submissions to the subgroup which are under active consideration. I expect to receive a report on these issues from the National Working Group in May of this year. I have noted the results of the recent teacher ballots. I believe that the National Working Group and its subgroups are the best place to address concerns. Indeed, I have already agreed to changes in the phasing in of these reforms in response to concerns raised by education partners. I welcome the fact that teacher unions are continuing to engage in these fora. Insofar as continuing professional development is concerned, most of the planned CPD workshops for this academic year have already been rolled out. The junior cycle will roll out to schools from this September on a phased basis. This has been reiterated in a recent circular issued by the Department of Education and Skills. The new specification for junior cycle English will be implemented from September. The Level 2 learning programme for a very small number of students with special education needs will be optional, as indeed will be short courses. The first school-based assessment event under the new JCSA for junior cycle English will take place after Easter 2016. In the interim, I am committed to ongoing discussion with the education partners on all aspects relating to the phased implementation of the JCSA.
Thank you, Laskin Corrin. Thank you, Minister, for your reply. Minister, it's a very unfortunate position we find ourselves in, and it is one which is entirely avoidable as well, in my view. There's widespread agreement in relation to the need for junior cert reform and to ensure that it becomes a lower stakes exam than we have seen to now and the students change the way they actually learn. However, we didn't and we shouldn't have been in the position where this is being introduced now under the umbrella of industrial action from the teachers. And it has very much been the way you've handled this process, Minister, from the outset that has led to this particular situation we now find ourselves in. There's a number of concerns that are there. One of the key ones relates to the need for independent assessment. The lack of consultation we've seen between yourself particularly, and the lack of a hands-on involvement from you in terms of engaging with the other partners apart from yourself that are involved in delivering junior cert reform, has led to the situation which has actually been introduced under a situation where there is actually dispute. Minister, yesterday you said that you're willing to discuss and talk about the independent assessment and the independent marking of exams. We've heard this from you a couple of times up until now, but yet there hasn't been any indication or any real engagement from you.
Thank you,
can you outline to us now what, Minister, it is you're willing to consider, and will you agree to the fact that there needs to continue to be independent assessment exams? The exam can become lower stakes, but it shouldn't become one that is inconsistent.
I'll come back to the Deputy again, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy, for your question and indeed for your support in this matter. Nobody is suggesting that we should go back to the 1967 primary certificate examination. And I'm suggesting that it is a political decision to decide to get rid of the state examination at 15 years. That's my responsibility. How we do it, the way in which it's implemented, and all of that, of course, I'm open to discussion. And I'm still open for discussion. We are still asking the two trade unions representing the post-primary teachers to set down in writing what resources it is that they want us to provide, to give some comfort in relation to their concerns, because this is about the children at the end of the day. I have slowed down the timetable by a factor of, I think, 2 years, certainly 1 year. We are ensuring that the State Examination Commission will set the exams and mark them for English, Irish and mathematics for the foreseeable future. We're talking about an event that's due to take place in June of 2017.
Thank you, Minister.
And therefore, I think there is time for us to address the concerns, but I'm still waiting for the unions to give me in writing what it is they want by way of resources.
Well, Minister, maybe if you had engaged a bit more constructively from the outset, you wouldn't be in the situation where you're asking them for this now. The 2 times that you have outlined the timetable for implementation of Junior Cert, or the Junior Cycle Student Award, you have done so unilaterally and without consultation with other partners in terms of how that would actually roll out. The first time you did it, you then found that you had to go and revisit it. The second timetable you outlined, Minister, again, that wasn't done in consultation. It was one you introduced yourself. So it's no surprise with that type of approach that you now find yourself in a situation where there's conflict. And this is undoubtedly going to make a big difference to second-level education. It can have a lot of, it will have a lot of benefit to students. But there are genuine concerns there, Minister. And I firmly believe that we need to continue to ensure there's independent assessment. So will you give a commitment to actually reconsider that and take on board the concerns that are there, Minister, not only from among teachers, but also from parents as well? Thank you.
Minister.
Deputy, as Minister for Education, and someday you may very well have the same responsibility yourself, you can't be put in a position as Minister with a mandate from the electorate and accountability to other deputies that a stakeholder in the system will simply say, no, you cannot change the status of exam. That's what the unions have said. The 2 unions say they are ultimately opposed to removing the state certification of the junior cycle. They want it to remain the same as it is, junior cert. That is the responsibility of people in this House. How we do it, how it's implemented, is of course open for consultation, and I'm still waiting for them to give me what it is they want in writing. But the autonomy of the Minister for Education, and this is an interest that's shared across all of the political parties, is on basis of the best evidence, and I would refer you to a recent article published by Emer Smith and Francis Ruan from the ESRI. This is the right way to go. How quickly we get there, the speed at which we travel, and all the other things, of course I'm going to discuss, and I'm open for discussion, and we are still discussing. But they cannot hold a veto over the new destination for education in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy O'Brien.
Minister, are you saying this morning that despite all of the engagements with the unions and their participation within the working groups, that they still haven't given you a firm indication of what resources are needed to roll out the new junior cycle reform? And does a lot of discussion around self-assessment, and that's where the nub of the problem seems to be. And in speaking to teachers, I don't think the issue is about self-assessments, because most teachers assess their students anyway, in Christmas exams and Easter exams and ongoing throughout the year. The crux of it seems to be at the state examination level. There needs to be some sort of independent analysis or verification of that assessment, and I think that's where the focus needs to be put on, Minister. And I'm just wondering how we're going to get there, because I have a daughter, as you know, entering into post-primary this year, who's going to be one of the first students to do it. And from speaking to parents at the gate, they don't know what's happening.
Thank you, Deputy.
They don't know what the changes are going to be and how it's going to affect their children entering into first year this year. And we need to rectify that, because we're running out of time very
Margaret, Minister.
We are tight for time because, in fact, we lost effectively the summer months for discussion because one of the unions was involved in reballoting its members in relation to Haddington Road, which was a separate issue altogether. First of all, to confirm your question, I haven't received in writing formally from the unions what extra resources they want. We've received from the management bodies at post-primary level suggestions as to what they would need in order to bring in the changes. The whole question of assessment, and you're right, Deputy, through the Chair, in relation to this, we are very anxious to sit down and talk to them and see what kinds of assessment, how it can be done, what way it will be, etc. But it will be a low-stakes exam, and we were prepared to enter into models, suggestions, comparators, indications of what is the normal practice, all these kinds of things, so that to provide assurance in relation to it. In repeating what I said to Deputy McConalogue, as an interim transition in the three key subjects of English, Irish and Maths, that will be a written exam, and there will be assistance in relation to that, and it will be set by the State Examinations Commission and will be marked by the State Examinations Commission for the time being. And we're talking about something from 2017 onwards. So yes, I'm open to discussing realistically and practically and in a way that gives comfort and assurance to everybody how to implement this. But I cannot accept a veto on its implementation.
Deputy O'Brien.
The implementation group, Minister, is that still meeting, and are the unions still participating in the implementation group?
Minister, final reply.
The answer is yes. They're still engaged in that fora, and we're still making progress.
Now, the next priority question is in the name of Deputy Jonathan O'Brien. Number 2, Deputy O'Brien, you wish to introduce the question.
I'll just await the answer asking.
Okay, thank you. The answer, number 2, Minister.
Lascan Corla, I understand from Carranua that between the 6th of January and the end of March it has received 2,345 applications. The first part of the application process is to verify that an applicant is eligible to apply. At end March, 2,145 applications have been verified as eligible and 20 deemed ineligible. The remaining, the remaining 180 are still being examined. Carranua then confirms applicants' identity, and by end March this year had completed this had been completed for 504 applicants. 113 applicants have been contacted by telephone to discuss what the applicant wishes to apply for, and of these 73 have been assigned to an application advisor. The intention is that the remaining 40 will be assigned an advisor shortly. The advisor provides assistance and further information about applying for services. At this stage, assessments can be arranged if necessary, or referral to someone locally who can provide face-to-face assistance. I understand that 26 applications for approved services have been approved by end March for medical and dental services, orthopaedic equipment, home repairs and education grants.
Deputy O'Brien.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, just in relation to some of the figures you've given there, it's just over 2,000 applicants now, and I think in a statement you made previously to the House, you were saying roughly about 15,000 people could be eligible to apply. And I'm just wondering what steps Carranua are taking in terms of contacting the additional 13,000. Just in terms of the number of applicants which have been approved, I think it was 4 at the end of February, and it's now up to 26. And we have, it just seems a very low number based on the number of applications which have come in. And even the number of applications which have progressed to the advisor level is only 73. It seems a very slow process, Minister, and you will be well aware, Minister, that a lot of these people are elderly people who, time is of the essence in terms of trying to access some of the services that they can access under this. And I'm just wondering, in terms of resources, has anyone mentioned the fact that it's such a slow process?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Like all organisations, there was some teething difficulties in setting up staff, and we had some personal issues in relation to members of the board. The chairperson had to, unfortunately, step down for personal reasons. Notwithstanding that, we have a director in place, and approximately 15% so far of those we deem to be eligible, the 15,000, approximately 14-odd thousand that you referred to, Deputy, have applied. I will discuss with the board whether the information out there to the interest group, shall we say, is sufficiently put out so that people are not deterred from applying, or at least are aware how to apply and all of that. And I'll come back and report to the Deputy.
Deputy O'Brien.
I actually had somebody into my constituency office last week, Minister, who did make an application under it, and unfortunately he was turned down. The reason he was turned down, I think there's a limit of 5,000 per year in terms of back to education, in terms of going back to college and getting a grant to do that. And the course that he had applied for was a cookery course, which unfortunately was in excess of 5,000 per year. And on that basis, he was turned down. And I'm just wondering, is there any flexibility built into it? I know it's an independent statutory agency, Minister, and you don't have any power. But I'm just wondering, is there any flexibility that can be shown to individuals? It was a one-year course, and unfortunately, because it exceeded the cap that was on it, he was turned down on that basis.
Minister.
If the Deputy wishes to give me the details of the case, I'll explore it within the context of what you've just said in terms of the independence of the organisation itself.
Come on. Question number 3 in the name of Deputy Charlie McConlogue. Deputy McConlogue. Is question, Minister.
At primary level, a teacher exchange scheme exists whereby a teacher may voluntarily exchange with a teacher in another school. The minimum period for which an exchange can occur is 1 year, and the maximum is 5 years. There are 25 exchanges involving 50 teachers currently in place in primary schools. Given that such exchanges are for a limited period of time, it is not appropriate for such teachers to have panel rights in respect of their new school. The exchange scheme was agreed under the auspices of the Teachers' Conciliation Council, a body established in accordance with the terms of the Conciliation and Arbitration Scheme for Teachers. Excuse me. This council is composed of representatives from teachers, school management, the Department of Education and Skills and the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, chaired by an official of the Labour Relations Commission. Any changes to the exchange scheme are therefore a matter for the Teachers' Conciliation Council.
Deputy McConnell.
Okay. Thank you, Minister, for your reply. As you indicated, this is the teacher exchange programme is something that can last anything from 1 to 5 years, and it's temporary. So, in the county or the area where the person who's on the exchange actually goes to, other teachers who are in temporary positions can acquire panel rights, so that if they spend 2, 3, 4, a certain amount of time, they then have the capacity and the option of applying for jobs within that region itself. Obviously, anyone, Minister, who is part of this teacher exchange programme may develop ties and commitments to the area in which they're in, and most will probably want to revert back to their base school. But I think it is something that should be considered, that those who are, let's say, there for a certain period of time, that they should be treated in the same way as other temporary teachers teaching within that area. So if they decide not to go back to their original base school, that they have that opportunity and ability to actually seek alternative employment and other schools within the area which they were teaching in, bearing in mind the fact that the teacher with whom they were exchanging will probably want to come back to the school that they left. So I think, Minister, I would ask, is that something you'd be willing to consider? And the other thing I would ask you is a permanent exchange programme, is that something you've given consideration to, or that you would be willing to look at? Thank you.
Minister.
It hasn't crossed my desk, I have to confess, Deputy, but in the light of your question to me, I'm happy to consider it, and I'll review the situation. I'll write back to you and see. As I said, I believe the initiative is probably with the teachers' unions and the teachers' representatives. But let me get a more comprehensive answer, and I'll send it to you, and you can then decide what's the best way forward.
Deputy McConnell.
Thank you for agreeing to do that, Minister, and I look forward to engaging with you further on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go on to other questions, and number 5 is in the name of Deputy Colm Keaveney. Deputy Keaveney. 30 seconds. Sorry, Minister. I think Deputy. Do you?
Yep.
No, yep, I don't. Minister.
Lascancola, I recently announced that an additional 390 special needs assistance posts have been made available to the NCSE to allocate to schools to the end of 2014, bringing the total number of SNAs available to a number of 10,965, up from 10,500 in round figures. An additional 480 resource teaching posts have also been made available for the current school year, bringing to over 10,700 the number of resource teaching / learning support teachers in mainstream schools. This is a greater number of SNA and resource teachers than had been allocated at any time previously. In May 2013, the NCSE published policy advice on supporting students with special needs in schools, which makes a number of recommendations to improve special education provision. At my request, the NCSE has now developed proposals for a new model for the allocation of teaching supports to schools. I will consider these proposals carefully, along with my colleagues in government, in order to establish how best we can continue to make improvements to special education provision.
Deputy Keaveney.
I'd like to thank the Minister for his response. We all acknowledge that over the last decade, many great advancements have been made in the area of special need provision for children. I also want to welcome the 390 additional posts in this area. However, Minister, there remains an issue of resources across the country, in my view, that there are black spot areas with respect to, in particular, in areas of Dublin West and indeed North Kildare. Now, one school minister enrolled 2 junior infant classes at the commencement of last year, totalling 54 children. Halfway during the academic year, it came to the attention of the authorities there that 3 children had very challenging needs. It was quite obvious from the initial consultations with the parents in 2013 that this was the case. And it was no surprise to the school because they had, in one instance, they had an assessment of needs for one of those children. Now, during the course of that academic year, it became apparent to the principal of that school that there was a problem in terms of securing resources for those children. One of those children's parents secured an assessment of needs, and as a consequence of that, they got 4.2 hours per week in low-instant teaching hours. Now, the 2 children who didn't get the needs assessment continue halfway during this year. They're waiting 12 months for the assessment. The first year of their education life has been lost without the critical supports that are required to make sure that they can successfully participate.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
I thank the Deputy for his supplementary question. If you'd like to send me the details, I can have a look at it for you, because it's a specific case. But the allocation of resources is based on an assessment done by the SENO, or in some cases by private arrangements made by the parents, and I think that's what the Deputy is referring to.
Come on, Deputy Keaveney.
I'd like to thank the Minister for his invitation to forward the details. Minister, do you not think that there's an opportunity for every child in the state who goes through the public health system, particularly with the developmental assessment at 3.5 years of age, that there is a provision there for every child to have concluded an assessment of the developmental needs at a public health frontline? Is there not an opportunity to integrate and to establish a more effective way of establishing a child's needs a year before entering into the primary education system? Not every parent can afford that opportunity to go to the credit union, borrow, put their hand in the pocket to get that assessment's need. And I'm asking you to maybe look at, I know it's another department, but I'm prepared to accept that you are flexible enough to look at an opportunity of integrating some data with respect to a child's developmental needs from a primary care setting into the Department of Education to establish the needs of a child.
Thank you. Minister, final reply.
I will consider what you've suggested, Deputy, through the Chair and discuss it with the Minister for Health and indeed with the Minister for Children and Youth Affairs.
Question number 6 is in the name of Deputy Jonathan O'Brien. Do you wish to...
No.
Minister, number 6.
Thank you, Lascancola. RSE is one component of SPHE in the existing junior cycle. As part of the new Junior Cycle Student Awards, the NCCA is currently finalising its specification for a new short course in SPHE. Development of the specification, including consultations and reviews of existing data, is therefore based on evidence and best practice. The SPHE short course will be available to schools from September of this year. Circular 2014 clarifies the position for schools in relation to SPHE and other subject areas for the school year of 2014-2015. Schools may choose to incorporate the SPHE short course into their junior cycle programme, either for certification purposes or not for certification. Or they may choose not to offer the new short course and continue instead to offer the existing SPHE syllabus. There are no plans to review the content of the RSE curriculum at primary level or at senior cycle at present.
Margaret, Deputy O'Brien.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I'm aware that the RSE is part of the curriculum and there's an obligation in schools to implement it. One of the concerns that I would have is that the curriculum sets out that this must be done within the ethos and the value system of the school. Now, Minister, that's all well and good, and you know it is progressive that schools are implementing RSE programs and that students are being educated around the whole relationships and sexuality program at junior cycle and senior cycle and post-primary. One of the concerns I have is because it's been implemented on an ethos base, that some LGBT students may feel isolated. They may not be getting the information. It's not based on life experiences, in my opinion, and that's one of the downfalls of it. And I'm just wondering what criteria is used, Minister, in terms of inviting some of the external people into schools, because we've had some reports recently where people have come into schools and they've spoken about abortion, they haven't spoken about contraception, they haven't spoken about LGBT issues, which are all very relevant to students, in my opinion.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Lascan Corley. Deputy, I'm aware of those reports, and my concerns have been raised by a number of people in my own party and indeed by other parties in this House, and I welcome this question. I'm informed that, notwithstanding